Luke, a 9-year-old boy with a profound sense of right and wrong, has always been committed to safeguarding his loved ones, regardless of the challenges. On what was intended to be the most joyous day of his father's life, Luke makes a choice that alters everything. As he observes his father about to marry Emma, a woman concealing sinister secrets, Luke takes a stand that no one could foresee. Stepping forward, Luke discloses a startling revelation that halts the wedding abruptly. However, the ensuing events leave everyone in shock. What triggered Luke's revelation to have such intense repercussions? How did the bravery of this young boy unveil the hidden truths about his father's fiancée? And what long-term effects did this act of courage have on their lives? Stay tuned to discover the answers. Before we proceed, share where you're watching from today, and tell us if this tale of bravery and honesty strikes a chord with you. And don't forget to subscribe. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows of the quaint chapel, bathing the gathered guests in a warm light. The atmosphere was filled with excitement as friends and family conversed quietly, their eyes eagerly fixed on the altar entrance. John Matthew stood tall in his sharp black tuxedo, a nervous smile on his face as he awaited his bride. "You look, Dad," whispered Luke, the 9-year-old boy, nervously clutching a small pillow. His dark curls were neatly styled, and his miniature suit perfectly matched his father's. While John radiated happiness, Luke's brown eyes were filled with concern. John glanced down, offering a reassuring wink. "Thanks, buddy. You're the best ring-bearer a dad could ask for." He affectionately tousled Luke's hair, unaware of the anxiety marked on the boy's face. As the first notes of the wedding march played, the congregation rose to their feet, all eyes turning to the chapel doors, eager to see the bride. Everyone watched except Luke. His focus remained on his father, his small hands gripping the ring pillow so tightly his knuckles whitened. The door swung open, revealing Emma in her bridal finery. She gracefully walked down the aisle in white lace and silk, her golden hair cascading in soft waves, and her blue eyes gleaming with emotion as she approached the altar. John's face shone with pure love. "You look beautiful," he whispered, as Emma stood beside him. She returned his smile, her voice soft. "I can't wait to start our life together." The officiant began the ceremony, his words enveloping the attendees. But for Luke, every moment dragged on painfully. He shifted nervously, his eyes flickering between his father and Emma. To an outsider, it might have appeared as mere nervousness, but there was something more urgent beneath Luke's demeanor. Young Luke was lost in memories from the past few months, recalling the day his father introduced him to Emma. It was a crisp autumn day when John picked him up from school, his face alight with excitement. "I've got someone special I want you to meet, buddy," he said, practically bouncing in his seat as they drove home. Since his mother's passing 2 years earlier, it had just been Luke and his father. The idea of someone new entering their lives filled him with uncertainty. Upon arriving home, Emma awaited them on the porch, her golden hair catching the late afternoon sun. She greeted them with a warm smile. Luke noticed how his father's eyes sparkled at her sight. "Luke, this is Emma," John introduced proudly. "She's become very important to me, and I hope she becomes important to you too." Emma knelt to Luke's level, her blue eyes twinkling. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Luke. Your dad talks about you all the time." In that moment, Luke felt a spark of hope. Perhaps things wouldn't be so bad after all. However, as weeks passed, that hope dimmed. Luke observed how Emma changed when John wasn't around. Her warm smiles vanished, replaced by cold stares and tight-lipped frowns. One evening stood out vividly in Luke's memory. John was working late, and Emma was supposed to watch him during dinner. Luke attempted to engage her. "Miss Emma, do you like space? We're learning about the solar system in school." Emma cut him off sharply, not looking up from her phone. "I'm busy right now. Please eat your dinner quietly." Luke recoiled, pushing his food around his plate as the silence became overwhelming. When John was home, Emma was different. She'd ask about school, laugh at his jokes, and even ruffle his hair affectionately. But Luke sensed the insincerity in her smiles and the tension behind her eyes. Meanwhile, John seemed happier than ever, moving around the house with a joyful energy that Luke found both embarrassing and endearing. "Isn't Emma wonderful? We're so lucky to have her in our lives, aren't we, buddy?" John would often say. Luke nodded and forced a smile, not wanting to shatter his father's happiness, though inside he felt increasingly isolated and confused as months went by. Emma's true nature became clearer to Luke as she began making subtle, hurtful remarks when John wasn't around. "Oh, Luke," she would sigh, eyeing the mess from a school project. "You're such a handful. Sometimes I don't know how your father manages." Or when Luke shared a good grade, she'd respond, "That's nice, dear, but there's always room for improvement." These comments eroded Luke's self-esteem, making him feel like a burden at home. He started withdrawing, spending more time alone in his room and avoiding common areas. One Saturday afternoon, about 3 months before the wedding, an incident left a lasting impression on Luke. John had gone out, leaving Luke and Emma alone. While watching cartoons and sipping juice, Emma entered, demanding he turn off the TV. Startled, Luke knocked over his glass, spilling juice everywhere. "I'm sorry," he cried, rushing to clean up. Emma grabbed his arm, her frustration evident. "Look what you've done. You're so clumsy and careless, Luke. If you tell your father about this, you'll regret it." Fearful, Luke nodded and hurried to clean, his hands trembling. That night, John returned to a cheerful Emma, kissing him and asking about his day. Luke watched from the stairs, feeling more alone than ever. As the wedding approached, Luke struggled with a heavy secret. He wanted to tell his father about Emma's true behavior but was held back by fear. What if John didn't believe him? What if it made Emma angrier? One evening, about a month before the wedding, Luke mustered the courage to talk to his father. John was in his study when Luke timidly knocked on the door. "Come in, buddy," he called out with a smile. "What's up?" Luke hesitated, twisting his shirt. "Dad, can I talk to you about something?" John set aside his papers, giving Luke his full attention. "Of course, son. You can talk to me about anything. What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, Luke said, "It's about Emma. I don't think she likes me very much." John frowned, confused. "What do you mean, Luke? Emma adores you." "No, Dad, she doesn't. She's different when you're not around. She ignores me and sometimes says mean things." John interrupted gently. "Whoa, slow down." Luke tried again. "She's trying to make me feel bad all the time." But John shook his head, dismissing his concerns. "No buts, buddy. Emma is going to be your stepmother, and I need you to give her a chance. She's trying her best, just like we all are." Defeated, Luke slumped. "Okay, Dad," he mumbled, turning to leave. "I love you, kiddo. We're all going to be just fine." "You'll see," John called after him softly. Feeling hopeless, Luke stopped trying to tell his father about Emma's behavior. Instead, he withdrew further, becoming quieter and more reserved. He dreaded family dinners and outings, forced to pretend everything was fine while enduring Emma's subtle jabs. Meanwhile, John was caught up in wedding preparations, oblivious to his son's turmoil, mistaking Luke's quietness for shyness or a phase. Emma seemed to triumph in her subtle mistreatment of Luke, with John unaware of her true nature and Luke too scared to speak up again. She grew bolder in her mistreatment, and one afternoon, Luke overheard a conversation between Emma and her friend Sarah. "I don't know how you manage with him," Sarah was saying, referring to Luke. "I couldn't handle it," Emma replied. Luke froze in the hallway, holding his breath to listen. "Oh, it's not so bad, Emma," she continued with false sweetness. "Luke's just part of the package. You have to take the good with the bad." Sarah laughed. "You're saying? I'd have sent the kid off to boarding school by now." Luke didn't wait to hear more. He sneaked back to his room, feeling devastated. It was clear that to Emma, he was merely an inconvenience in her relationship. Trapped, watching his father and Emma make plans without considering his feelings, discussing honeymoon destinations or redecorating the house, made Luke feel invisible and unimportant. One night, unable to sleep, Luke got up to get a glass of water. He froze when he heard Emma's hushed, angry voice on the phone. "Tom, you need to listen to me," she hissed. "We can't rush this. Everything has to be perfect." Concerned, Luke realized something was wrong. Emma continued. "Once that's done, we move on to phase 2. Yes, the insurance policy. John doesn't suspect a thing." Luke's young mind struggled to comprehend. Insurance policy? Phase 2? He knew eavesdropping was wrong but couldn't stop himself. "Look, Tom, I've got it under control," Emma snapped. "Once we're married, it'll be easy. A tragic accident. A grieving widow. We're set for life. Just stick to the plan." Luke's heart raced. Money scams? What was Emma talking about? "Tom is the wild card," Emma growled, causing Luke to flinch. "He's too observant for his own good." "But don't worry, I can handle him. John is wrapped around my finger." Tears welled in Luke's eyes. He realized Emma wasn't just mistreating him. She was planning something sinister involving his father, money, and an insurance policy. Sleep eluded Luke that night as he replayed Emma's words. When morning arrived, he stumbled bleary-eyed to breakfast. "Morning, champ," John greeted him cheerfully. "You look tired. Rough night?" Luke nodded, avoiding Emma's gaze. "Just couldn't sleep," he mumbled. Emma's saccharine voice cut through the air. "Oh, poor thing, probably just excited about the wedding, aren't you, Luke?" Luke met her eyes briefly and saw a cold, calculating look behind her smile. "Yeah," he lied, forcing a smile. Over the next few days, Luke became vigilant, noticing things he had previously overlooked. Emma was constantly on her phone, locking it quickly whenever John entered the room. She claimed to be chatting with the wedding planner or dealing with bridesmaid drama, but Luke saw through her excuses. He occasionally caught glimpses of her screen, showing rapid-fire texts to someone saved as M in her contacts. Emma's absences from the house grew more frequent, with flimsy excuses to leave for hours, whether finalizing wedding details or attending last-minute dress fittings. John, blinded by love and focused on work, never questioned her. But Luke was aware of everything now. A week before the wedding, while helping John in the garage, Emma's car arrived. She hurried inside without noticing them. "I'm going to get a snack, Dad," Luke said, wiping his hands. John nodded, engrossed in fixing the lawnmower. "Bring me a soda while you're at it, will you?" Luke quietly entered the house, hearing Emma's muffled voice from upstairs. He climbed the stairs carefully, hearing her say, "We're almost done. Keep your shirt on." Luke moved closer to the door, straining to hear her mention the insurance policy again. "Once we're married, it'll be easy. A tragic accident. A grieving widow. We're set for life. Just stick to the plan." His blood ran cold. Were they planning to harm his father? Suddenly, Emma whispered, "The policy is ironclad." Luke leaned in to catch more, but accidentally bumped the door, making it creak. Emma hurriedly said, "I've got to go," and Luke retreated to his room, hiding under his covers as she approached the bathroom. "I have to go," she said, breathing heavily. Luke slumped against the bathroom wall, realizing Emma and Tom were plotting to kill his father for the insurance money. Feeling overwhelmed, he knew he had to act but didn't know how. With the wedding just days away, time was running out. Luke decided he couldn't let this happen and needed to stop the wedding to save his father. Back at the wedding, the officiant began speaking, but Luke was consumed by panic, knowing he had to act before it was too late. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace, the official declared. This was Luke's moment. Fear gripped him. What if he was wrong? What if no one believed him? What if he ruined everything for nothing? The officiant nodded, ready to continue. Luke's heart pounded. It was now or never. Suddenly, the words burst from him before he could stop. "Stop the wedding!" A collective gasp swept through the church. All eyes turned to Luke, who stood trembling, his small voice breaking the sudden silence. "Luke!" John turned to his son, confusion and concern on his face. "What's wrong, buddy?" Luke's gaze shifted between his father and Emma, who stared back with a mix of shock and barely concealed anger. "Dad," Luke's voice quivered, "you can't marry her. She's not who you think she is." John knelt, placing a gentle hand on Luke's shoulder. "What are you talking about, son? Are you feeling okay?" Luke shook his head firmly. "No, Dad, you don't understand. Emma has been lying to you. She's planning something bad." A murmur spread through the crowd. Emma laughed nervously, her eyes darting between John and the guests. "Oh, sweetie," she said with false sweetness, "I know this is a big change for you. It's okay to feel scared about having a new mom, but this isn't the way to express it." Luke felt anger surge at her patronizing tone. "No, that's not true. I heard you on the phone with Tom. I know about the insurance policy. You're planning to hurt Dad." The church fell silent. John's face paled, eyes wide with disbelief. "Luke, that's a very serious accusation. Where did you hear such a thing?" Emma's laugh grew higher, more hysterical. "Tom is my wedding planner. We've been discussing insurance for the ceremony and money for caterers and flowers." Luke must have misunderstood. But Luke wasn't backing down. "No, that's not true. I saw the insurance policy on your computer. It was for millions of dollars. If Dad dies and I found pictures of you with Tom, he's not just your wedding planner." The guests were in uproar, whispering furiously, some scandalized, others concerned. John stood frozen, looking between his son and fiancée. Emma's composure faltered, her mask slipping as she reached for his hand. "You know me, I would never—" "This is absurd," she spat. "Luke is just a child. He doesn't understand what he's saying." John's brow furrowed, torn. "Luke," he said slowly, "are you absolutely sure about what you heard and saw?" Luke nodded vigorously, tears in his eyes. "I'm sure, Dad. I wouldn't lie about this. Emma has been mean to me for months, especially when you're not around. She makes me feel bad all the time, and now she's planning to hurt you." John's face showed a storm of emotions, confusion, hurt, disbelief. He turned to Emma, his voice low and strained. "Emma, is there any truth to this? Any at all?" Her composure shattered, eyes darting around the church, taking in the shocked guests and the stern officiant. For a moment she resembled a cornered animal. Then her demeanor hardened, her mouth setting in a grim line. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "I don't have to stand here and be accused by a spoiled brat who can't handle sharing his daddy's attention." She addressed the crowd. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this tantrum. Clearly Luke has some issues we need to address as a family." John interrupted firmly, "No, I think we need to address this now, because if there's even a shred of truth to what Luke is saying." Emma's eyes flashed dangerously. "You can't be serious. You're going to believe the wild imaginings of a 9-year-old over me." "I love my son too, Emma," John responded, "and Luke's never lied to me before. He's not the type to make up stories, especially not something like this." Luke felt a wave of relief as his father listened, but Emma wasn't finished. "This is absurd," she cried, her voice rising. "I've done nothing but love you, John. I've tried to be a mother to Luke, and this is how I'm repaid, with baseless accusations and suspicion." She turned to Luke, her eyes blazing. "You little brat," she snarled, momentarily losing control. "You've ruined everything." The audience gasped as John's eyes widened at Emma's outburst. In that instant, he saw a side of her he'd never seen before, chilling him to the core. "Emma," he whispered, "what have you done?" Realizing her mistake, Emma backpedaled quickly, forcing a laugh. "Oh, John, can't you see this dress? It's all too much. Luke's outburst, these ridiculous accusations. I just lost my temper for a moment. Surely you can understand the damage that's been done." John took a step back, his eyes never leaving hers. "No, I don't think I can understand. Because the Emma I thought I knew would never speak to my son that way, no matter how upset she was." He turned to Luke, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Luke, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." With all eyes on him, Luke began to recount his experiences. He spoke of Emma's cold behavior when alone, the hurtful comments, the physical intimidation, The overheard phone conversations, the suspicious absences, the secret messages, the insurance policy on Emma's computer, and the photos of her with Tom. As Luke spoke, John's face grew increasingly pale. The guests listened in stunned silence, some in disbelief, others nodding as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Emma stood rigid, her composed facade completely crumbled by the time Luke finished. She looked nothing like the radiant bride who had walked down the aisle moments before. "Is this true?" John asked, his voice heavy with pain and betrayal. "Emma, look me in the eye and tell me none of this is true." Emma's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her eyes, once full of false warmth, now held only cold calculation. In that moment, John saw the truth, and it broke his heart. "I think," John said, his voice trembling, "that this wedding is over." A commotion erupted in the church as guests began to stand, some moving toward the exits, others crowding closer to hear what was happening. Emma saw her chance and, with a snarl of frustration, bolted down the aisle. Her white dress billowed behind her like a ghostly apparition as she pushed past shocked guests, making a beeline for the church doors. "Stop her!" someone shouted, but Emma was swift. She burst through the doors into the bright sunlight, leaving chaos in her wake. The church descended into turmoil as Emma fled, her white dress fluttering behind her. John, still reeling from the revelations, quickly took action. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed. "Yes, hello. I need to report a crime," John said, his voice quivering. "My fiancée was planning to kill me for insurance money. She just fled during our wedding. Please, you need to find her." As John spoke to the dispatcher, providing a description of Emma and her last known direction, Luke stood frozen, overwhelmed by the chaotic events he had initiated. A whirlwind of relief and anxiety churned in his stomach. He had saved his father, but at what price? Moments earlier, the guests had sat in solemn silence for what was meant to be a joyful occasion. Now they buzzed with shock and speculation. Some hurried outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the escaping bride, while others gathered in small clusters, whispering furiously and casting furtive glances at John and Luke. After ending the call, John turned to his son, his face masked with conflicting emotions. He knelt down, placing his hands on Luke's shoulders. "Luke," he said, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have seen." Luke wrapped his arms around his father's neck, burying his face in John's shoulder. "It's okay, Dad," he mumbled, his voice muffled. "I'm just glad you're safe." John held his son tightly, tears welling in his eyes for a brief moment. The surrounding chaos faded, leaving just the father and son united against the turmoil. Their moment was soon interrupted by the arrival of the police. 2 officers entered the church, their presence immediately commanding attention. The murmurs of the guests quieted as everyone turned to watch Mr. Parker. One of the officers approached John and Luke. "Yes, that's me," John replied, keeping one hand on Luke's shoulder. "I'm Officer Harris. This is my partner, Officer Cooper," the policeman introduced himself. "We need to ask you some questions about what happened here." As John began recounting the events to the officers, Luke's attention was drawn to a disturbance near the church entrance. A tall man with dark hair and a scar above his left eyebrow was attempting to push his way inside, looking frantic. Luke's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the man from the photos he had seen on Emma's computer. "It's Tom," Luke whispered urgently, tugging on John's sleeve. "Dad, that's him. That's Tom." John's head snapped up, following Luke's gaze. His eyes widened as he recognized the man from Luke's earlier description. "That man by the door, I think he's involved. He's the one my son overheard Emma talking to on the phone," John said quickly. The officers acted swiftly. Officer Harris remained with John and Luke, while Officer Cooper moved towards Tom, who was now trying to retreat from the church. "Sir, stop right there," Officer Cooper called out. Tom froze for a split second, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Then, in a burst of panic, he turned and fled. Officer Cooper gave chase, shouting into his radio for backup. The wedding guests watched in stunned silence as the officer disappeared through the church doors in pursuit of the mysterious man. "Mr. Parker," Officer Harris addressed John, his voice calm yet authoritative. "I believe it would be best if you and your son came down to the station to provide a full statement. We need to gather all the evidence you have regarding Miss Emma's plans." John nodded, still looking shell-shocked. "Of course, whatever you need." Luke looked up. "Buddy, are you okay to go with us to the police station?" Luke nodded bravely, his heart racing. "Yeah, Dad, I want to help." As they prepared to leave, John's best man, Ben, approached them. "Dave," he said, placing a comforting hand on his friend's shoulder. "What do you want us to do about all this?" He gestured vaguely towards the church, filled with confused and concerned guests. John ran a hand through his hair, looking overwhelmed. "I don't know, Ben. I guess. Tell everyone to go home. Apologize on my behalf. I can't deal with this right now." Ben nodded understandingly. "Don't worry about it, man. I'll take care of everything here. You just focus on you and Luke." "Okay," John managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Ben. I don't know what I'd do without you." As John and Luke left the church with Officer Harris, they could hear Ben addressing the crowd, his voice steady and reassuring as he explained the situation and asked everyone to return home. The ride to the police station felt surreal. Luke sat in the back of the police car, watching the familiar streets of his hometown blur by. Everything appeared the same, yet everything had changed. His father sat beside him, uncharacteristically silent, his eyes unfocused as he gazed out the window at the station. John and Luke were led to a small, plain room with a table and a few chairs. Officer Harris assured them it wasn't an interrogation room, just a quiet place to talk without interruptions for the next few hours. John and Luke recounted their experiences with Emma. Luke described the overheard phone conversations, the cruel treatment when John wasn't around, and his discovery of the insurance policy and photos on Emma's computer. John, still looking shell-shocked, filled in the gaps with details about his relationship with Emma, trying to pinpoint when things might have started to go wrong as they talked. More pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Emma had suggested increasing John's life insurance policy just a month after their engagement, citing concerns about Luke's future. If anything happened to John, she had also been pushing for them to take up more dangerous hobbies together: rock climbing, skydiving, even swimming with sharks on their honeymoon. "I thought she was just adventurous," John said, his voice hollow. "I never imagined." Luke reached out and took his father's hand, squeezing it reassuringly. John managed a small smile, grateful for his son's unwavering support. As the day progressed, more information trickled in. Officer Cooper had apprehended Tom a few blocks from the church. Under questioning, he quickly broke down, revealing the full extent of the plan he and Emma had devised. It turned out Emma wasn't even her real name. She was actually Sarah Connors, a con artist with a long history of seducing wealthy men and then disappearing with their money. Tom was her longtime partner, both in crime and in life. They had been pulling these scams for years, but nothing had been as ambitious or deadly as their plan for John. The insurance policy Luke had discovered was just the beginning. Emma, or Sarah, had been systematically isolating John from his friends and family, subtly manipulating him into changing his will to leave everything to her. The plan was to stage an accident on their honeymoon, collect the insurance money and John's estate, and then disappear to start a new life together. As the full scope of Emma's deception became clear, John seemed to collapse inwardly. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered, either to Luke or the officers. "How could I not have seen what was happening?" Officer Harris, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up with sympathy. "Mr. Parker, don't blame yourself. These people are professionals. They've done this before and are very skilled at manipulating others. The important thing is that they didn't succeed thanks to your son." John looked at Luke, a mix of pride and lingering guilt in his eyes. "You're right," he said softly. "Luke saved my life today. I just wish I had listened to him sooner." Luke felt a surge of love for his father and leaned into John's side. "It's okay, Dad. We're okay now." As the day turned to evening, there was still no sign of Emma. She had seemingly vanished into thin air after fleeing the church. The police assured John and Luke they were doing everything they could to find her, but warned that she was experienced in disappearing. "We've put out an APB and alerted all local and state law enforcement," Officer Harris explained. "We're also monitoring airports, bus stations, and car rental agencies. But I have to be honest with you, she had a head start and knows how to cover her tracks." John nodded wearily. "I understand. Thank you for everything you're doing." As they prepared to leave the station, Officer Harris handed John his card. "If you remember anything else, or if Emma tries to contact you, please call me immediately, day or night." John pocketed the card, then turned to Luke. "Ready to go home, buddy?" Luke nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the day's events. He was exhausted both physically and emotionally. The drive home was quiet. Both father and son were lost in their thoughts as they pulled into their driveway. John turned off the engine but didn't move to get out of the car. "Luke," he said softly, turning to face his son, "I owe you an apology, a big one." Luke looked at his father, confused. "Surprised for what, Dad?" John sighed heavily. "For not listening to you. For not seeing how Emma was treating you. For putting you in danger by bringing that woman into our lives." Luke was silent for a moment, contemplating his father's words. Then, with wisdom beyond his years, he replied, "Dad, you were just trying to be happy and make us happy. You couldn't have known what Emma was really like." John's eyes welled with tears. "But I should have seen how she was affecting you. I should have noticed that you weren't happy." Luke reached out and took his father's hand. "I didn't want to ruin things for you. You seemed so happy with her. I thought maybe I was the problem." John's heart broke at his son's words. He pulled Luke into a fierce hug despite the awkward angles across the car seats. "Never, Luke. You could never be the problem. You're the best thing in my life. And I'm so sorry if I ever made you doubt that." They sat there for a long moment, holding each other and letting the tears flow freely. It was a cathartic release, washing away the pain and fear of the past months. Finally, John pulled back, wiping his eyes. "What do you say we go inside and order a ridiculous amount of pizza?" "I think we've earned it," Luke managed a small smile. "Can we get stuffed crust?" John laughed, the sound a bit watery but genuine. "Buddy, after today, you can have whatever kind of pizza you want." As they walked into the house, both John and Luke felt a weight lift from their shoulders. The specter of Emma, or Sarah, still loomed, but they would face it together for now. They were home, they were safe, and they had each other. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. John and Luke's lives were turned upside down as they dealt with the aftermath of Emma's deception. There were more interviews with the police and meetings with lawyers to untangle the legal mess. Emma had created endless calls from friends, family, and even reporters seeking details about the wedding day drama. John did his best to shield Luke from the worst of it, but there was no escaping the reality of their situation. Emma remained at large, seemingly having vanished into thin air. The police kept John updated on their search, but as days turned into weeks, the hope of finding her began to fade. Tom, on the other hand, faced the full force of the law in exchange for a plea deal. He had provided a wealth of information about Emma's past cons and their network of associates. His testimony painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal operation that had been active for years, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts across the country. For Luke, the aftermath of the wedding day was a mix of relief and anxiety. He was glad his father was safe and that Emma was out of their lives, but he couldn't shake the fear that she might return someday to seek revenge. John noticed his son's unease and did his best to reassure him. He installed a new security system in their home, complete with cameras and motion sensors. He also made sure Luke knew he could come to him with any concerns, no matter how small they might seem. "We're a team, buddy," John said, ruffling Luke's hair affectionately. "You and me against the world, remember?" Luke nodded, feeling a bit safer each time his father reaffirmed their bond. As the weeks passed, life slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy. John threw himself into his work, taking on extra projects to keep his mind occupied. Luke focused on school, finding comfort in the familiar routine of classes and homework. One Saturday morning, about a month after the ill-fated wedding, John and Luke were having breakfast when the doorbell rang. John tensed, still wary of unexpected visitors, but relaxed when he saw Ben, his best man, through the peephole. "Hey man," Ben said as John opened the door. "How are you guys holding up?" John managed a tired smile. "We're hanging in there. Come on in." Ben followed John to the kitchen where Luke was finishing his cereal. "Hey, little man," Ben greeted, giving Luke a fist bump. "You doing okay?" Luke nodded, returning the fist bump with a small smile. He had always liked Ben, who treated him like a person rather than just a kid. "So," Ben said, accepting a cup of coffee from John, "I actually came by for a reason. The guys and I have been talking, and we think it's time for you to get out of the house for a bit. What do you say to a camping trip next weekend?" John hesitated, glancing at Luke. "I don't know, Ben, with everything that's happened." "That's exactly why you need this," Ben insisted. "Just a few days away from all this." He gestured vaguely around the kitchen. No phones, no reporters, no lawyers, just the skies, some tents, and the great outdoors. Luke perked up at the idea. "Can we go fishing?" he asked, a spark of excitement in his eyes that John hadn't seen in weeks. Ben grinned. "You bet, buddy. We'll catch enough fish to feed an army." John looked at his son's hopeful face and felt something loosen in his chest. Maybe this was exactly what they needed, a chance to breathe, to remember what life was like before Emma came into their world. "All right," he said, smiling as Luke's face lit up. "Let's do it." The camping trip turned out to be exactly what John and Luke needed, offering a respite from the constant reminders of Emma's betrayal. They found themselves relaxing for the first time in months, spending their days hiking, fishing, and sharing stories around the campfire. Luke enjoyed learning how to set up a tent and roast the perfect marshmallow, while John rediscovered the simple joy of watching his son laugh and play without a care in the world. On their last night in the woods, as they sat around the dying embers of their campfire, John pulled Luke close. "Thank you, buddy," he said softly. Luke looked up at his father, puzzled. "Confused for what, Dad?" John smiled, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "For being you. For being brave. When I couldn't see what was happening. For saving us both." Luke snuggled closer to his father, feeling safe and loved. "We saved each other, Dad," he said wisely. As they drove home the next day, both John and Luke felt renewed. The shadow of Emma still loomed in the background, but it no longer seemed all-consuming. They had weathered the storm together and emerged stronger for it. Life continued to move forward. Luke started a new school year, immersing himself in his studies and making new friends. John, encouraged by his therapist, began to cautiously re-enter the dating scene. Though understandably wary and taking things very slowly, everything changed again 6 months after the wedding. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Officer Harris arrived at their door, his face grave. "Mr. Parker," he said as John invited him in. "We found Emma." John's heart raced. "You've arrested her?" He looked for confirmation. Officer Harris shook his head. "No, sir. I'm afraid we found her body in a motel room just outside of Vegas. It appears she took her own life." The news hit John like a physical blow. He stumbled back, steadying himself against the wall. "She's dead," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Officer Harris nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir. We believe she'd been there for a few days. There was a note." At that moment, Luke came bounding down the stairs, stopping short when he saw the police officer. "Dad?" he asked, his voice tinged with worry. John turned to his son, his face pale. "Luke, buddy, why don't you go to your room for a bit? I need to talk to Officer Harris." Luke hesitated, his eyes darting between his father and the officer. "Is it about Emma?" he asked softly. John sighed, realizing there was no point in hiding the truth from his perceptive son. "Yes, it is. Come here, buddy. We should talk about this together." As they sat in the living room, Officer Harris gently explained the situation, careful to spare Luke the more distressing details. "Emma," or Sarah as she was truly named, had been on the run for months, always staying one step ahead of the law. But the pressure had taken its toll, as indicated in her note, he said, his voice softening. She expressed remorse for what she'd done and said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. John sat in stunned silence, his arm around Luke's shoulders. The boy looked up at his father, his young face etched with concern. "Are you okay, Dad?" John managed a weak smile. "I don't know, buddy. It's a lot to process." After Officer Harris left, promising to keep them updated on any developments, John and Luke sat together on the couch, both lost in thought. Luke then asked, "Do you think she really felt bad about what she did?" John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, buddy. People are complicated. Sometimes they do bad things and then regret them later. But what's important is that we learn from this and move forward." The news of Emma's death marked a turning point for John and Luke. While it brought a sense of closure, it also stirred up complex emotions that took time to process. They attended counseling sessions together, learning to navigate their feelings and strengthen their bond even further. As the months passed, life settled into a new normal. John threw himself into being the best father he could be, cherishing every moment with Luke. He also rekindled old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during his relationship with Emma, rebuilding his support network. Luke, for his part, blossomed. The weight of secrecy and fear lifted from his young shoulders. He became more outgoing at school and excelled in his studies. He developed a passion for detective novels, often joking that he had a head start in a mystery-solving department. On the one-year anniversary of the ill-fated wedding day, John and Luke decided to start a new tradition. They packed a picnic and drove to a beautiful state park, spending the day hiking, fishing, and simply enjoying each other's company as they sat by a crystal-clear lake watching the sun set. John turned to his son Luke. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened last year." Luke looked up, curious. "Yeah?" John nodded, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "I realized something important. What Emma did was terrible, but in a way, it taught me the most valuable lesson of my life." "What's that, Dad?" Luke asked. John smiled, ruffling Luke's hair affectionately. "It taught me that the most important relationship in my life, the one I should always prioritize, is right here." He gently poked Luke in the chest. "You and me, buddy, we're a team, and nothing's ever going to change that." Luke beamed, throwing his arms around his father in a tight hug. "I love you, Dad." John held him close. "I love you too, kiddo," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "More than you'll ever know." As they packed up their picnic and headed home, both father and son felt a sense of peace settle over them. The past year had been a roller coaster of emotions filled with betrayal, fear, and uncertainty, but it had also strengthened their bond in ways they never could have imagined. They had weathered the storm together, emerging stronger and closer than ever. As they drove home, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Both John and Luke knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The story of the boy who stopped his dad's wedding had become a tale of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond between father and son. It was a reminder that sometimes the happiest endings come not from fairy tale weddings, but from the simple, profound love of family as they pulled into their driveway. John looked over at Luke, who had fallen asleep during the drive. He smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. The future was uncertain, but with Luke by his side, John knew they could handle anything life threw their way. And so, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, John carried his sleeping son into the house, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring together. Luke's courage and determination to do what was right not only changed his father's life, but also sent shockwaves through their entire community by speaking up and revealing the truth about his father's fiancée. Luke demonstrated the power of bravery. No matter how young you are, his actions uncovered hidden truths, healed relationships, and reminded everyone that honesty and love should always come first. If Luke's story touched you, be sure to subscribe for more heartwarming and inspiring stories. And before you go, we'd love to hear from you. How do you think you would have handled the situation if you were in Luke's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below.